Hi, I'm Kelly with CitrusCycles.ca. I'm here with Moustache's new FS series of e-bikes. Made in France, the Samedi XRoad FS3, FS5, and Friday 27 FS all feature an independent rear swing arm and shock, and I'm going to pop over to the other bikes in a few moments. Similar to a full suspension mountain bike, they give you lots of comfort and much better handling for improved safety and confidence. So although you could go mountain biking with them, they aren't really mountain bikes. You can see we've got fenders and a rack and the lights that are built in running off of your main battery, so you can really use them for everything. Commuting, adventuring, touring, pretty much whatever you want to do with it. I love riding Moustache e-bikes because they always seem to pick the perfect components and bring them together in a way that makes riding the bike just so enjoyable. Perhaps this is because they only make e-bikes, so they aren't trying to take an existing bike and add a motor. Or maybe it's because they're willing to make their own components when they don't find exactly what they want, such as their own custom tubular fenders here. I don't know if you can see under there, it's actually a tubular fender, super stable. They do other things, like they have their own rear shock. So they made the shock because they wanted a shock that was designed specifically for the characteristics of an e-bike, which is great. Of course, Moustache is known for their beautiful designs. We've got their hidden power integration here. So behind this cover we have a standard Bosch power pack battery, and I'll talk about that battery in a little bit. But it's really cool that they've integrated that in the frame, making it just this, really beautiful looking bike. So that power pack means that it's really easy to bring a spare if you want, and unlike the Bosch power tube, because they could have went with the Bosch power tube to integrate it in the frame, but this is nice because it does lower the center of gravity, and it's a little bit lighter as well. Moustache chooses to use Bosch because of the reliability, their extensive service network, and the great riding characteristics, along with the fact that you can expect to be able to get spare batteries and parts well into the future. And that's a really important consideration. You want an e-bike that is fun and safe and is going to last you a really long time, while also being comfortable and will take you wherever you want to go. So in this video, I'm going to talk a bit about the FS, or full suspension idea. I'll give you an overview of the differences between the models, so I'll bring out the other models, and then I'll go into the details. So if you aren't interested in the details, or you don't have time, because this is going to be a really long video, you can always skip to the ride test at the end. As you can see, I'm very passionate about e-bikes. I ride e-bikes every day. For me, it's transportation and recreation along with fitness. So if you have questions or you want to check out the detailed specs or current pricing, you can head over to our website at CitrusCycles.ca. There you'll find our contact info, so you can order online with free shipping in Canada, and I'd love for you to stop by the store and try it out yourself, and you can call or email to set up an appointment. Now you'll notice when you come by the store, check out the videos, I'm always going to be completely upfront about what I like and don't like about the bike, and so I'm going to do that in this video. And I can do that because I ride them all, and because I'm not getting paid for these video reviews. Now, I do make a living by selling e-bikes, so of course if you purchase your bike from CitrusCycles.ca, either here in the store in Ladysmith or online, obviously that's going to help me keep doing these videos. However, my goal is to help you find the perfect e-bike for your needs, find an e-bike that you love, and that's why I do these. I have 3 of Moustache's FS series bikes here. FS stands for full suspension. Now, normally on a bike like this, you'll have a front suspension, like this Suntour XCM ATV. It has 100 millimeters of travel. And that has a number of benefits. Obviously, it's going to give you more comfort. That's going to mean less fatigue. And just as importantly, it gives you more control over your bike on uneven surfaces. You won't be thrown around when going over a bump or a pothole. Now, suspension forks for the front wheel are pretty common. What makes the FS series unique is that they also have suspension for the rear wheel. So you can see we have an independent swing arm here and a rear shock. The exciting thing about this rear shock is that it was made by Moustache and was designed specifically for e-bikes. That means it was designed with a higher weight and different handling characteristics of an e-bike in mind. Normally, we see the rear shock on mountain bikes, and you may think that since you're not mountain biking, there just won't be a benefit or you don't need it. But in fact, just like the front suspension gives you that more comfort and less fatigue, the same thing happens with the rear shock. That means you're going to be able to ride longer, more frequently, and this is especially beneficial if you have problems with your upper body getting sore on rides. If you have back issues, shoulder or neck pain, for example, this is really great because it isolates you from all of those bumps and vibrations that cause the fatigue and cause you to stop riding. This is going to help you ride for longer because it's going to be very comfortable. But just as important, it also gives you more control. In other words, both your front wheel and your rear wheel are always going to be connected to the ground because of that suspension. When you don't have that suspension, your back wheel can kind of jump around. When you're cornering, it'll fishtail a little bit. You may not notice it, but definitely you'll notice when you come and try this and try a bike without the rear suspension, and immediately you'll notice that you're feeling more confident, and you're probably going to ride a little bit more quickly. You'll also notice a big difference on uneven terrain, potholes, broken pavement, and on trails. Another really interesting thing when you come and try this, again, this idea of having the rear swing arm and shock giving you more control over the bike, you'll notice that around corners. You'll notice that the bike actually handles better because of that rear shock than a bike without the rear shock. So when you can handle difficult surface conditions like broken pavement, railway lines, gravel and potholes without having to slow down or kind of swerve to avoid them, you are now more predictable for motorists, and that's going to make you safer. So for anyone that isn't a super confident cyclist, this actually gives you more control, safety, and comfort. If you are an avid cyclist, then this rear suspension here with the shock is going to give you much more comfort for longer rides. So now that I've explained the benefits of the FS series, I can give you a quick overview of the 3 models that are available here in Canada. So let's start with the Friday FS27. So this is the perfect bike for commuting and touring on roads and light trails. You can see that they use the Schwalbe Supermoto X tire. It's highly puncture resistant, and it's really great on everything except for deep mud. So it's a nice wide 2.4 inch wide tire here. It's an interesting profile on this tire. You can see it's very, very rounded. So what that means is when you're rolling on pavement, you're really only rolling on the center channel here, and that really helps to reduce the rolling resistance. This is actually a fast rolling tire despite the size. But when you get into gravel, soft sand, anything like that, the nice thing is that the rest of the width of the tire comes into play to give you lots of traction, almost like you're floating over the sand instead of sinking in and making it hard to steer. So lots and lots of traction, stability, and control, especially for cornering. Wet conditions, this tire works really well. There's no knobs on it, so if you get into a lot of mud, that's really the only weakness of the tire. Otherwise, for all other conditions, it works really, really well. The Friday 27 FS features Bosch's Performance Line mid-drive motor. It features 63 Newton meters of torque, and I'm going to get into the motor later, but that's a little bit lower than the 75 Newton meters of torque that is found on the XRoad FS5. Torque is what you need for climbing hills. So the XRoad FS5, which I will talk about in a few moments, will get you up the hills more quickly, but you'll still get there with the Friday. Now, speaking of hills, we do have the Shimano Dior. It's a 10-speed derailleur with an 11 to 32 tooth cassette. So for most roads, this is more than adequate for hill climbing. But if you have really steep hills, like we do here in Ladysmith, then the 11 to 40 tooth that is found here on the XRoad FS3, the Samedi XRoad FS3, or the huge 42 tooth on the FS5 is a good option to consider. The FS5 upgrades you to 11 speeds instead of 10, and upgrades you to the Shimano Dior SLX derailleur. So the more teeth the cog has, the easier it is to climb steep hills. Now, interestingly, the front cog here on the Samedi series, so this is the Samedi XRoad FS5, Samedi XRoad FS3, can be a little bit confusing. Anyways, on the Samedi series, the XRoad FS5 or FS3 gives you a little bit of a smaller front cog. So again, that gives you more hill climbing capabilities. We come back to the Friday here. You can also see the color difference between them. The Friday, it's quite stunning. It's kind of a gray color here, and then the Samedi FS5, XRoad FS5, is kind of this blue. You can see there's a bit of metallic glint in there. It's a beautiful looking bike. And then the Samedi XRoad FS3 has some red in there with the gray frame as well. And the frames on all of the bikes are essentially the same, and the rear shock is the same as well. So coming back to the Friday, we do have a Brooks leather saddle. So Brooks saddle, this is leather, which at first of course is hard, but over time it's going to soften up. It's going to basically conform to your body shape. It'll be your saddle, and basically this is a piece of leather strung over a rail at the back and a rail at the front, and basically it's a hammock. So it can be very comfortable, but at first it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to. The Samedi series, the XRoad FS3 and FS5 do come with a, this one comes with a Selle Royale, a little bit more of a performance-oriented gel saddle. So we've got some gel in there here as well. Now of course saddles are easy things to change. If you don't love the Brooks, or you want a Brooks on the Samedi, of course we could change that for you. Now the Friday really is designed a little bit more for urban use. So an example of that is we've got this really cool quick park feature here. So I can push this forward, try to do it with one hand, there we go, lift up this lever here, and now I can actually twist the handlebars to be parallel to the frame without the front wheel turning. And then of course twist it back and lock it into place. So that's really handy if you have limited space in your garage or office or condo or apartment, wherever you're storing your bike. It makes it really easy to be able to fit that in. Another example of the urban intention for the Friday is we've got these really nice ergonomic grips here. They are locking, so they won't swivel on you while you're riding. You can get those nice and tight, and of course you can loosen off the bolt and adjust the angle as you wish. When we come over to the Samedi, we can see it is a more of an off-road performance-oriented bike. So the grips here are more of an off-road grip. They do have a bit of a flare on the end here. They're actually quite comfortable, especially for the off-road riding. But again, grips are an easy thing to change. These are locking, so you just loosen that bolt up, slide them off, and you know, you can put some really nice Ergon GP grips on there if you wanted something that has a little bit of flatter palm rest area. Coming back to the Samedi series, the frames essentially are the same between the Samedi and the Friday in the FS series, but the Samedi is set up to be a little bit more off-road capable. If we look at these tires, you can see there's the Hutchinson Python tires. If you look at the tread pattern here, it's still going to be very efficient on the road because of the continuous connection here. But when you get into trails, gravel, mud, then you've got some knobs here on the side and even in the center there that are really going to help you grip. So if you're looking for a bike that is a little bit more off-road capable, I mean, the Friday still, you could ride off-road. Those Supermoto X tires are great. But if you're wanting to do, you know, some mountain biking or something like that, then looking at the Samedi series is worth considering. When we move up to the FS5, which is this one here, then we're actually getting the Bosch Performance Line CX drive. So that gives you 75 Newton meters of torque. So tons and tons of torque, which is great. Again, torque is what you need to get up the hills. We get that larger cassette as well for climbing hills. We've upgraded the brakes to the Shimano MT400. Some nice upgrades, and also a brighter front light. So you can see that's a different light than the FS3 has, and also different than what the Friday has. So a nice upgrade light on there as well. So let's talk about comfort and safety for a few moments. You'll notice that they all have these really neat swept back bars here. That's going to put you in a little bit more of an upright riding position, but they're not so swept back that they're going to compromise the handling of the bike. You'll notice on the ride test that they handle really, really well, but it is nice having that comfortable riding position, but at the same time, you're not sacrificing control over the bike. All three have these fantastic tubular fenders made by Moustache. One of the things I love about Moustache is you know, their bikes are made in France, and when they can't find something that suits their needs, they're willing to make it. So, you know, they made their own rear shock there, which is fantastic, and they made their own tubular fenders. And so you can actually see under there, this is actually a tubular system, super, super solid. It's not going to flop around. You will, if a stone kind of gets thrown up in there, hear a little tinkling every now and then, but otherwise they're silent and really, really rigid and durable, which is great. I mentioned that we do have the lights built in, running off the main battery on the Friday and the Samedi FS3. We've got a nice side cutout in the light there, which is great for visibility. And on the back, we have the lights integrated in the fenders. I love the fact that the wiring is running, you know, not underneath the fender, but through inside the fender, so you don't have to worry about the water getting into the light wiring or anything like that. Again, that rear light is running off of your main battery. We actually have some pretty decent pedals on the bikes. Often I complain about the pedals that manufacturers use. Nice wide platform pedal with some pins to keep your feet from sliding, so that's great. I mentioned the brakes on the FS5, but all three models do have the Shimano hydraulic disc brakes, which is really important. I think we've got 180mm rotors up front to help you with the stopping power. So that's really important on an e-bike. You want to be able to stop very safely and quickly. And with a hydraulic brake, you're relying on the hydraulic fluid to stop the bike rather than the strength of your own hands. So with a mechanical disc brake, you're pulling a cable. You have to pull that cable harder to stop harder. With the hydraulic fluid, you don't have to. You have a lot of modulation in the brakes here. So just like your car, you don't have to press harder when you're going down a steeper hill. It's the same on these bikes. You can simply stop really with one finger on both levers going down any really steep hill. Another thing I love about Moustache bikes is they've got these fantastic racks that they make themselves. Of course, you can put standard pannier bags on the side here, a trunk bag on the top. They also include the QL3 connectors. Of course, you can remove those if you're not using a QL3 bag, but the Ortlieb QL3 bags basically just click right on and click off. They're not going to scratch your rack or anything like that. Really easy on and off. Again, if you're not using the QL3s, just pop those off and use any standard bag on there. So it's interesting, they've actually connected the rack to the fender, and yet it's still very solid because these are the aluminum tubular fenders, so a lot of strength there, and of course to the dropouts on the bottom. Interestingly, the rack is not part of the suspension, so if you look at the Riesenmuller D-Lite series, for example, or the Homage or Culture, also full suspension bikes, which are really great to have, they've actually connected the rack to the seat post. That means it's actually part of the suspension. So in this case, if you have bags on the back here, they are going to travel with the rear travel on the rear swing arm there. And we also have a kickstand, which is great. We've got, I think it might be a proprietary kickstand though, because it's actually bolted on at the rear of the swing arm here. It would have been cool if they would have used a regular kickstand that mounts onto the plate here so that it's standard. If you ever break your kickstand, it'd be easier to replace, but I'm sure we'll be able to get these from Moustache if we needed to. They're adjustable, which is nice, so we can adjust the length if you're parking on a slope or something like that. While I'm back here, I should point out we do have a quick release through axle on the back here, which is great, and then a quick release dropout on the front fork as well. So speaking of that kickstand and possibly changing it, before I get into the Bosch system, which I'm going to do right away here, let me just talk about a couple other things that would be interesting to change. Again, like I said, I'm not getting paid for these reviews, so I can tell you, what I think of the bike. Like I said, the rack thing would be interesting to connect it to the suspension, but I understand why they didn't do that, because it would require a really different design on the bike, and I love the design of the bike. Really very light and very easy to work with. Another interesting thing to consider, like I mentioned, these fenders are fantastic, but they do get a little bit of tinkling noise from rocks every now and then. So I wonder if at some point they'd consider maybe putting a rubber lining or something in there to kind of get it a little bit quieter. I did mention that we've got a dropout on the front fork here. It would have been really cool if they'd used a fork with a through axle instead. But you know what? This actually performs really well. I was very hesitant at first, when they first came in. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about this fork, and what an amazing shock, what's going on with the fork. Then I rode it, and actually it works really well, so it's not a bad thing at all. The other thing that would have been really cool, but I think would be really hard to mount, would be some sort of frame lock, because the non-FS versions of these bikes, so they make them as what we call a hardtail without the rear suspension, brings the price down a little bit, but personally I think these are great value. Like when you look at the price differential between the non-FS and the FS, to me, totally worth getting the FS. There's no downside. You get that comfort, stability, control, all of that, but we don't have a frame lock on there. I'd have to check and see if that's something we could add. It'd be pretty tricky given the geometry of the bike here, so I can see why they didn't do that. But just get a good folding lock, and that's probably a little bit better than a frame lock anyways. So on to the section on the Bosch drive unit. So as I've mentioned, Moustache exclusively uses the Bosch mid-drive. We've got the Bosch Performance Line CX on the FS5, and then the FS3 and the Friday, use the performance line. With the Performance Line CX, we do have 75 Newton meters of torque, which is fantastic. Lots of torque. Torque is what you need to get up the hills. So when we talk about wattage ratings on motors, it's not that useful. What we really care about is the torque. That is real world torque. We have definitely seen you get lots of power with this. With the CX motor as well, we do get the advantage of Bosch's EMTB mode. That is, I'll just pop you up here to the top. We're looking at the Intuvia display from Bosch. Bosch has 3 different displays. This is the largest and easiest to read. You'll notice that we've got different levels of assistance, including off, ride like a regular bike. Over here on the left, we can change that using the plus and the minus. So I go to plus, we've got Eco, which is a minimal amount of assistance. It's giving you 50% of your input power. And by that I mean the Bosch system is actually sensing your torque, that is how hard you're pedaling, your cadence, that is how quickly your legs are spinning, and the speed of the bike. You can see there's a speed sensor there and a magnet. 1,000 times per second. So it is really reading your mind. It knows exactly what's going on, and on Eco gives you 50% of that power. So most people tend to ride on Tour, which is a higher level of assist, gives you 120% of your input power. The cool thing is we can optionally enable EMTB. I'll show that to you again. You'll see it'll flash up on the screen there. So though it says Sport there, it flashed EMTB. That's a dynamic adaptive mode, only available on the CX drive. Bosch originally designed it for mountain bikes. When you're mountain biking, you don't want to be adjusting the levels. If you're riding on difficult terrain, you really just want to be focused on riding. And so in that EMTB mode, the bike is dynamically adjusting anywhere from that 120% in Tour up to the 300% that's available in Turbo, based on mostly on your torque. So it kind of figures out if you're pedaling really hard because you've got a big hill coming up, gives you that 300% boost. If you're pedaling lighter because you're working your way through a difficult section of the trail, then it moves you down to the 120. Now, of course, you can put it all the way up to turbo if you wish, and that gives you the 300% power. That's exclusively on the CX drive. On the performance line, that sport mode is simply just sport. So there's a lot of advantages to going with the mid-drive. You've got your weight centered and low on the bike instead of in the rear tire or in the front tire. It also obviously makes it easier to change a flat because, well, this is just a regular bike tire. It doesn't have a motor in the back of it. But the biggest thing with a mid-drive is that it's leveraging the mechanical advantage of your transmission, of your gears. So the motor is turning the chain, and that means that when the chain moves to an easier gear, the motor is also in an easier gear. That's going to make it easier to climb hills. It's going to make it more efficient, so you're going to get further range. And in the case of a mid-drive like the Bosch here, we have lots of torque, typically much more torque than you'll see in a hub motor. So it's really beneficial having that, and again, being able to leverage changing gears. The other interesting thing that you'll find when you come and ride a bike with a mid-drive, especially one like the Bosch, is it's very natural feeling. Especially in the lower levels of assistance, it just feels like riding a bike, and that's because your bike is normally propelled by you turning the chain, and it's just simply assisting you. When you have a hub motor, then it's turning the wheel, which is different sensation than normally riding a bike. So I do like having the mid-drive. I especially appreciate having Bosch. Bosch is super reliable. They've got a great service network. Most bike shops in North America and Europe have their training to deal with the Bosch system. Not that there's a lot that needs to be done, but Bosch also does some really clever things like making all their parts readily available. They also require the manufacturer to use their own battery. So Moustache has their really cool hidden power design here, but I just do is push down on that. That opens up this rubber cover here, and inside you'll see it standard Bosch Power Pack 500. I can charge this on the bike or off the bike, so there's a charging flap here. Moustache did a great job of including a leash, so if you take this off to charge it, you don't have to worry about losing it. It's going to be attached to the bike. And up here also on a leash is the key cover, really well sealed. Put your key in there and turn it to release the battery. So you do need a key to release the battery for security. Now the great thing about this is it's a Bosch Power Pack 500, so currently that's Bosch's highest capacity battery. Got a carrying handle, really easy to carry. Bosch has 2 styles of batteries, and again, Bosch requires the manufacturer to use their battery. Moustache couldn't say, well, I'm going to make my own battery so it integrates nicely into the frame. The advantage of that is that you know that a number of years from now, should you need a replacement battery, you're going to be able to get that because you're not relying on the bike manufacturer, you're relying on Bosch. And Bosch has definitely got that parts commitment of saying, yes, we're going to have batteries available for you well into the future. So as an example of that, the Bosch PowerPack 400, which has 25% less capacity, is backwards compatible and interchangeable with this PowerPack 500. So when they had the ability to make a higher capacity battery, they purposely chose to make it backwards compatible so that if you bought a Bosch bike 4 years ago, you could walk into the store, put a PowerPack 500 and ride away. So that's really cool. The other battery Bosch has is the Power Tube battery, which does integrate into the frame. It's a longer and heavier battery, and so Moustache chose to use the PowerPack for a number of reasons. It does get the center of gravity lower because it's a shorter battery. It's a little bit lighter because it's got the plastic casing instead of aluminum, and this is really easy to bring a spare. The Power Tube you could bring along as a spare, but it's much longer and a little bit heavier, and so this is really nice, really easy, you know, to get on and off because of that carrying handle there. Throw it in your backpack if you wanted to bring a spare. So now you do get tremendous range with that Bosch PowerPack 500. The Bosch website has a really handy range calculator that will show you all of that information, which is really clever. Head back up to the Intuvia display. As I mentioned, Bosch has a few different drive units. Sorry, they do have a few different drive units, but I'm talking about the displays now. They have the Purion, the Intuvia, and the new Kiox. So this one is nice and big, really easy to read. We've got our battery level up there, current speed, level of assistance. There's a graph here that lights up to show you how much the motor is assisting when you're pedaling. And we have up and down arrows that will light up to show you when you should shift. So it actually has shift recommendations. So that'll help the motor be more efficient and you as well, although you don't have to follow them. They're handy to have, and you can turn them off. Speaking of shifting, the Bosch system does also offer shift detection. So when you shift, it'll briefly cut power to the motor to help prolong the lifespan of your drivetrain because, of course, shifting under a heavy load, especially with the assistance from the motor, is a little bit more wearing on your drivetrain. So it's nice. Bosch is one of the few systems that actually does that. In addition to the nice big speed readout here on the display, we also have some trip information down here, and you can cycle through that either by pressing the I button on the display itself or on the remote. Obviously, when you're riding the bike, use the remote. But when you take the display off, because it is removable if you wish, although you can permanently mount it to the bike using a set screw there if you wish, you can still actually cycle through your trip information. So that's kind of handy to know. You can take a look at your trip time, your range, and that's a really useful feature that will actually dynamically adjust, showing you based on the level of assistance you're in, the last few kilometers you've gone, and how much battery life you have left, exactly how much further you can go. Continuing through the trip information here, I've got our trip distance, a clock, maximum speed, average speed, and your trip time. So lots of information there that can be reset. You can also control your lights here, turn them on and off. One of the recent updates that Bosch did is if I turn the bike off and the lights were on, of course the lights are going to turn off, but the bike's going to remember when I turn it back on that the light was on, and it'll come back on when I turn it on. So that's a really handy feature. There we go. See, the lights are on again. We can charge a USB device through the port on the side here, which is really handy. And we do have walk mode as well. We enable that ourselves. Often these ship from Moustache with walk mode not enabled, and so we do enable that. All you have to do is turn the assistance on, say to Eco, press the walk button. Nothing happens, so you think it's broken, but the display tells you Walk Assist Plus. That's your cue that now you press and hold the plus button. That'll move the bike along at about a 4 or 5 kilometer an hour pace, and you will want to check that you're not going to get hit by the pedals, because the pedals will turn during walk mode. One of the cool things about the CX drive in the walk mode is it actually senses when you're going up a hill and will give you more power for walk mode than if you're on flat. And of course that's great if you've got some stairs you need to get by, or you're going off the ferry ramp and they don't want you riding off. You can kind of just walk the bike straight out. So that's the Bosch system. We've got the Intuvia display and the Bosch CX 500 watt-hour battery, or the performance line. I'm going to take you on a ride test. If you have any questions about the bike, if there's anything I missed, you want to come try it yourself, or you want to buy it, you can find all of our contact information, current pricing, or order online on our website at citruscycles.ca. So for the ride test, I'm on the Moustache Samedi XRoad 5, the FS5, sorry. That's kind of their top end, so I'm getting the Bosch CX drive here. And I do notice that right away. I'm on the EMTB mode, which I love being on, just that automatic dynamic adaptive mode. And I can get up to that, kind of 32 kilometer an hour cut off pretty easily on the flat section here. Lots of power in that motor. it's a really nice riding position. Got a bit of sweep on the bars here, but not so far swept back that it feels like I can't control the bike. And in fact, really it's very trail capable. Despite having the sweep there, the bars are still wide enough. They have enough leverage, and yeah, really easy to control. This Dior SLX drivetrain shifting nice and smoothly. No problem on the hill here. Easy to climb up. Again, I just leave it on the EMTB mode. That way, if I get to the top of the hill and I don't have to worry about turning it off turbo and putting it back on turbo for the hills, it knows when I need that extra power and when I don't. Of course, if you don't want to pedal hard for up the hills, you can certainly put it into turbo. Not feeling a lot of drag or resistance from these tires. They are a little bit more of a aggressive tread, good hybrid tire for, you know, commuting on pavement, but also hitting the trails. Now this is where I'm noticing that full suspension come in. I'm onto some rougher pavement here. Normally you'd be feeling the vibrations of these larger stone sizes and the asphalt through to your upper body, and we've got some potholes and uneven pavement, and it's nice because it's just really smooth. This rear shock especially is great, and you know, I was a little hesitant at first about the fork that they're using up front. I didn't feel that it really matched the quality of the shock, the back, but it actually is performing really well. I'm really happy with how it's handling all these bumps. A couple bumps there, and really smooth. Of course, that's great if you're commuting. You know, if you're riding on stuff like this, slam on the brakes. Lots of stopping power in the brakes. Lovely Shimano brakes. You didn't lock up the wheels or skid. Yeah, really nice stopping power. So the nice thing is, if you are commuting on rougher roads, you're not, you know, kind of swerving and avoiding like I'm doing now to try to avoid potholes. You can kind of keep your speed and heading consistent, and that's great in traffic because you're going to be a lot safer that way. It really is a very comfortable ride. I like the saddle. There's some good gel support in there, and certainly the suspension, especially that rear shock, is really quite nice. Back onto a trail here, and this is the nice thing about a bike like this is, you know, on those occasions when you have time or you see a trail where you wonder where it goes, or you want to take the shortcut, or in my case the long way home, this bike is going to handle that no problem. You know, you could definitely go mountain biking with it. It's got the motor you'd need and the gearing that you'd need. Of course, you want to be careful with those fenders if you're riding in a lot of mud. Tires would be good on mud, but you wouldn't want the fenders getting clogged up. And I love having the rack and the fenders, a nice comfortable riding position. I might be inclined to put some of the Ergon GP1 grips on. I'm kind of missing those a little bit. But I understand why they put them on. If you are going mountain biking or in different riding positions, you may not want to have those regular grips. Got some hills coming up here, moderate one, and then I'll go under the tunnel. It'll be a really steep hill. Hopefully the GPS will show you the grade. The speed on the GPS will be inaccurate because it only measures the horizontal distance. It's not actually taking into account the ascent up the hill, so I'll try to let you know the numbers as I'm climbing. It's nice being able to ride on mixed terrain, go through these various barriers in the trail here, and you know that the bike's going to respond really well. Nice having the lights built in, running off your main battery for tunnels or riding at night. Okay, here comes the big hill. Just for fun, I'll boost it up into turbo again. I could just leave it on EMTB and pedal harder, and it'll move me to that 300% quite readily. But if I don't want to pedal hard, I can put it to turbo, shift my gears, and of course with the mid-drive, changing gears is going to help a lot, because your motor is now also in an easier gear. I'm not anywhere near, I think I'm in 3, and I can actually downshift, or upshift to 4. So despite, oh, and I forgot to tell you the speed, I was doing at least between 13 to 15 kilometers an hour up there. And that is a relatively steep hill, and really no problems with that. Bosch CX on turbo, the gearing that's on this bike, you can definitely climb steep stuff. Find some other steeper hills for you in a little while. A nice smooth shifting. We do have the visual indicator with those SLX trigger shifters letting us know what gear we're in. I always tell people, you know, just kind of go by feel. Tires aren't noisy at all, which is nice. They still have a good tread pattern for gravel and a bit of mud, but doing fine on the pavement too. Okay, so I'm going to have to stop on a bit of a hill here, and this is a great time to mention that with the Bosch system here, I really don't need a throttle. So a lot of times people come in and say, oh, you know, I want a bike with a throttle. And the reason they're thinking they need that is not so much because they don't want to pedal at all, but because they're worried that when they start on a hill, they're not going to get going. And that's true on some bikes, especially if they have a cadence sensor. The motor doesn't assist until you've got the pedals turning, and the pedals won't turn because you're on a really steep hill. But with the Bosch system, it's no problem. As soon as you put force on the pedals, it senses your torque, gives you the assistance you need, and as you can see, even though I was stopped on a hill at the stop sign, no problem getting the power I needed to start right up. Alright, I'm going to hit some trail here. Potholes. Again, it's nice that I don't really have to worry, roll over the curb, and the bike handles it just fine. You know, Moustache has won awards for their mountain bikes in Europe. I think they won 2018 EMTB of the year. So you know that they have a lot of expertise, and I think you get the sense that they've relied on that to really build a bike that is at home, either on trails or, you know, in the city. I think what's surprising me about this bike is that it, you know, it's a full suspension bike, and I do ride other full suspension bikes, my mountain bike, and also my Riesenmuller D-Lite GX roll-off is full suspension. It's got dual batteries, and it's a heavier bike. This, despite it being full suspension, feels light. It feels agile, almost playful. Which is really quite fun. I'm quite enjoying it. No problem. Hello. Do have multi-shifting when I need to downshift there, which is nice. Lots of pedestrian traffic tonight. I like having the light, even just for daytime on the street, but also on the trails, people can see me coming. I have a bell, of course, I can use if they don't. And it's nice knowing that if I need to get into the sticks, so to speak, the bike's going to handle that as well. It's not the time of day I usually do these ride tests. It's usually when I'm on here, there's nobody else. Yeah, and that lightness that I was kind of talking about before comes through with the ease of which I can get some speed on this bike too. It's actually pretty quick. You know, I think certainly R&M is well known for their control technology, having the full suspension, and really pushing the envelope and getting people to realize that, you know, it's not just for mountain bikes and it's not just for really rough roads, it's for everything. And I was really excited that Moustache came out with that this year, because the R&M is a great product. Not everybody kind of wants to make that investment, and so the Moustache is a little bit a lower price point, a little more affordable to get, you know, into the full suspension. I think, you know, the market and where we're going to see things going in the next few years, especially with e-bikes, you know, because you're riding more varied terrain, longer distances, more frequently. It just makes sense to have this full suspension, and I think we're going to start seeing more and more bikes, more and more people realizing, you know, you just have to come and ride it. You realize, wow, it really does make a difference. It really does make you want to just keep riding. Got a nice climb here with some loose gravel, and you know, I put it in the easiest gear. I didn't even need to do that because I'm just crawling up, no problem. Loving these tires, getting lots of control. The balance of the bike is really well. So on that tight corner, climbing a hill there, I didn't have any front wheel lift, and it wasn't because I was really paying attention. I wasn't. I was just like, oh yeah, there's no front wheel lift. That's great. So I'm getting the traction into the front. But at the same time, I didn't spin out once, and this is really loose gravel. So climbing that hill, these tires did a really great job, because I didn't spin out at all. And if I can try here, nope, still can't. Nope, they're really great. Yeah, so it's a nice gravel tire actually, good tire for pavement and gravel. Every now and then you can hear the stones in the aluminum fenders. I do love these fenders, super stable, not flopping around, full coverage, so I don't have to worry about, even if you're a fair weather rider, you don't have to worry about riding through puddles. And if you're like me and ride every day all year long, then you'll be really glad to have those fenders. Logging roads like this is, you know, this is the bike you want. Again, fast, agile, responsive, comfortable, easy to handle and control. actually heading home from the bike shop right now, and this is what I call the long way home. So I can, you know, ride on the streets and the roads, and it takes me maybe 15 minutes, or I can come the back way here up that big hill on the logging roads in the beautiful forest here by the creek and the waterfalls. Maybe it takes me 25. That's the great thing about an e-bike. You know, I wouldn't have the opportunity. This would take me a lot longer on a regular bike. It would be a lot more work, right? I would get home really tired with all the climbing. With the e-bike, I can just do it on my way home or on my way to work. I won't be all hot and sweaty when I get there. The battery died on the last ride test, which is kind of why I just ended there in the middle of nowhere. So I'm actually headed on my way to work this morning, and there's this little trail here that you can kind of take, really a shortcut, but it's a lot of fun, and it goes down to the creek. And so, you know, if I manage to get away from home a little bit earlier, then sometimes I can come down this way, which is a lot more fun than riding on the road. And, you know, so it's messy here, but hey, I've got those fenders. Even though I'm on my way to work, I'm not worried about getting dirty. And yeah, it's steep and loose gravel and that sort of thing, and rough and bumpy, and there's some roots in here and rocks, but I have the full suspension, so it really is very comfortable and very safe and stable, so I can pop down to the creek here and check out what's going on before I head into work. So it's really great having a bike that does everything, right? So I can use it as your daily commuter, running errands, that sort of thing. But you can also, you know, hit on the trails on the weekend or on your way to work, and it's really great for that. I am feeling, you know, like it is very responsive. No problem climbing right up this hill. It just feels oddly like a light bike, and you know, with that full suspension, it's not particularly light, but it feels like it when you're riding it, and that's nice. It's just fun. It's agile. I really could go on some trails with it, no problem. So hopefully this has given you an idea of what you can do with the bike. I'm really enjoying riding it. One of those ride tests that I don't want to come to an end, but I do need to get into the bike shop this morning. Speaking of the bike shop, if you want to come try it yourself, if you have any questions, want to check out the current pricing, you can order it online. We do offer free shipping anywhere in Canada. You can find all of our contact info and the detailed specs on our website at citruscycles.ca.